Okay, so welcome to week 5. This week we're covering chapters 6 and 7 in the book, and so at this point, the new psychology of leadership. I guess that's what I'm calling the theory because they don't really give us a name for it. But anyways, the new psychology of theory of leadership, the theory in this book, the authors, I suppose, they're trying to paint a picture for us as to what a leader, a good leader, an effective leader needs. And they've kind of pinpointed it down to everything but the leader themselves, right? So they're kind of arguing that it's not anything that you're necessarily born with, it's not anything that you can really develop. It's really kind of a perspective or an approach that you can take to addressing the group as a whole and kind of becoming part of that group. Um, so they've been explaining this for the first 5 chapters. Now in chapter 6 and 7, they kind of say, in chapter 6 particularly, they kind of give us an outline. This is what you need to do. And then in chapter 7, they say, well, this is what you need to do after you've kind of posited yourself, placed yourself as a leader in that group. So the chapter 6 gives us 4 steps. Those 4 steps I kind of broke down into 3 categories. They kind of do it in chapter 6 themselves, but they don't really kind of highlight it in the book, so I want to make sure I highlighted it for you. So the first category that actually encompasses the first 2 steps, the first one is prototype. And so we've kind of talked about that a lot, and basically what they're saying there is that we're placing ourselves as the prototype for, and the kind of that prime member that embodies all of the values that the group holds dear. And so the prototype that we're talking about there, step 1 then falls into this. And step 1 basically says you have to prove there's a need for a leader, right? If the group's working great without a leader, why do they need you to lead that group, right? If they have kind of maybe a group government going on or something, they don't have a singular entity kind of leading them. Why do they need you? And so you have to create that need. How do you do that? Well, I'll explain that when I get through all 4 of the steps because it kind of makes itself cyclical in nature, I mean, like in a cycle. But let me explain. So, anyways, step 2 then is that you have to actually present yourself now. So you've created this need. We need a leader because we need to be able to achieve these goals, and we don't have anybody guiding us in that direction. Okay, you've created the need. Now, at this point, you have to present yourself as the prototype for that. Otherwise, I mean, someone else, a rival or whatever else that they talk about in the book, could step up and say, "Well, I'm that guy." And so, you, if you're trying to be the leader, and in this case, you're trying to become the leader of this group, you present the need. Now you have to present yourself as the prototype. As that prime member that encompasses or embodies all the values that this group holds dear. So now, after this, this is where you, as this prime member, you're defining the group's identity. You're trying to call or maybe call to attention or highlight particular values that the group holds dear, and you're kind of bringing them to light, and you're saying, I encompass these values. Now, one thing I should point out at this point is that these steps may not go in order, and that's what actually step number 4 kind of talks about a little bit more, and I'll get there, but it's very much possible that you might step into the group at this point, right? Because they've already defined themselves, and now you're stepping in trying to, I'd say take over, but you're in a good position to guide the group in the right direction. At least have those, you are the prototype for those values, and you would guide those values forward. This isn't something that you would necessarily, I feel like it comes out as being manipulative, but that's not what it's meant to be. It's supposed to be that you feel as though you are in the right role for this, not just that you want to be a leader for an arbitrary reason, for no reason at all, just other than you want to lead. That's not the idea. The idea here is that you see yourself as a person that can guide this group further and increase production or whatever it might be that this group does. So anyways, step 3 So you basically said, we need a leader. That's step one. And you've explained why. And then you presented yourself with this prototype, that kind of this prime member that encompasses or embodies these values that the group holds dear. And step three, now you're proving that you can fulfill these as a leader. But the thing is that you're defining the group identity is this is where you are defining group values. Okay, and so before I go any further, let me go ahead and get step number four, because step number four kind of explains how does this work. Like if you come into a group that already has values, then how are you defining the group values? What are you doing there? So let's go ahead and move on to step four. So the third category then. I started with definition. I'm identity. Okay. So step four then is to stay dynamic. Now let's think about this. You're aligning these guys to an identity, and typically these identities are principles or values, or oftentimes both. And so the idea here is that as a group member, so here's your group, right? The thing about this is that you're part of that group. You're the individual, though. So you have the whole group, and then you have a series of individuals. But within this, and we've talked about this throughout the first 4 or 5 chapters, these influence one another. And so it kind of looks similar to my diagram from last week where we talked about how society makes a paradigm. Same thing here, is that the individual, depending on where you come in, you're either being reactive or proactive. And that kind of fits in with Covey's habits, right? And so here, if you're being proactive, you're kind of presenting something. But if you're at the reactive nature, you're kind of adapting to something. So you need to figure out where is it that you're coming into this group. You have groups that align to a particular set of values. Let's think of a couple that are going on now. So if you look at Black Lives Matters. Matters? I don't know. Anyways. The idea there is that that group was created out of a series of values by particular people. Those people created the values, right? The whole group did. And then as more people join, those people adopt those values. Those individuals join the group, and they adopt, or adapt in this case, adapt to or adopt the values that the whole group's already created. Now, you have to figure out where you are in this process, because if you're coming in, well, obviously you have to adapt. But at the same time, if you feel that you are able to kind of progress this group a little further than they could ever be on their own, then you need to figure out where you fall into these steps, because that's where things are going to change, right? If you are coming in as an individual, you have to adapt to the values, right? Well, it's kind of hard to present yourself, or excuse me, create the need for a leader if they already have a leader, right? So you have to figure out where are you coming in that cycle. If you come in and you're the follower for a little while and you kind of embody the values, then people will start to notice that you are that prototype, right? And so you might come in here. Now, if you come in and you've already got the prototype and then you're kind of progressing through there, that would make sense. And then you stay dynamic, meaning you still create that need for the leader. So that's how it becomes cyclical or creates a cycle. Because when you stay dynamic, really what that means is that you continue this process. And so there's something else I wanted to say. I forgot what it was. But this is basically the idea here of how you would be the leader, but then maintain that leadership. Because as we talked about in the first 5 chapters, right, the good leader is really defined by the group. And so you have to become part of the group. As an individual, you join the group, and it's kind of hard to kind of join into that role. Oh, I'm going to the screensaver here. Kind of hard to go into that role as a leader, so you have to define yourself and create the need for a leader, or in this case, maybe create the need for a new leader. Define what is it that's problematic, maybe define what it is that could be better, and then present yourself as that prototype, as how is that going to progress, how are you going to be that person, and that's where you're proving that you can fill the need for a leader and staying dynamic, maintaining that need. Maintaining the need, if you find a need for a new leader, then you need to figure out how you can fill that. Or if not, then you need to find someone who can. But anyways, that's kind of what they're talking about in Chapter 6 as to how to do it. And then Chapter 7 just basically embeds this. What do you need to do to specifically fill these? But anyways, I wanted to take a few seconds to go through this because this is basically the foundation for Chapters 6 and 7. So anyways, take a look at this video and finish it up and go back to your assignments. And I'll have a video in just a few seconds that will outline all the assignments for this week. So anyways, have a good week, and I'll see you in week 6 for the midterm.